You are the first human who saw it fit to entrust me with your life. Baffling to me as it was the very first time I felt I had any good in me. More than a friend, I needed that. I needed someone to see me for more than just a wicked witch. Lalia quickly attempted to rebuff Kubra's statements. She laughed at her for thinking that way. She reiterated her commitment to protecting her, come what may. Why? Why do you wish to protect me suddenly? Kubra asked, perplexed herself by the witch's actions and words. Lalia ignored her question and decided to tell her a story to momentarily get her mind off the worrying and perhaps shed some light on the reason behind her actions. You wouldn't understand. I was disowned the very day I was born because I looked different. I was born with 12 fully grown fingers and toes. I also had a mouth full of teeth, much like how my mouth is now. She opened her mouth as if to illustrate what she was saying. The elders of the village knew that I was a witch, so they ordered my father to throw me in the forbidden forest, where I will be taken care of by my kind. They claimed that I was a curse and therefore should not be allowed to live amongst them. My father, being a council member himself, did not hesitate to do their bidding. On the day when I was to be banished from the village, my father decided to give me a name before handing me over to the village witch doctor and a few of the elders. Bundu, that is the name of my village. One of the outlying villages that was forgotten by history, as it is a poor village ruled by even more despicable rulers. As she recounted her past, Lalia could not help feeling a renewed rage and hatred towards her people. Her eyes had gone dark and grew a little smaller than a slit. Her appearance unnerved Kubra, but she was still intrigued by the witch story. She could not help feeling sorry for poor innocent baby Lalia as everything began to make sense to her. Our village was ruled then by the Cereburus. All the farmers in the village were tasked to pay homage to them by giving up half their harvest to the Cereburus. Lalia continued. Oh, I've heard rumors about the Cereburus. Kubra interrupted. Who hasn't? Lalia responded. She was not surprised. The Cereburus have ruled the outlying villages for generations. They were very harsh rulers and ruled by intimidating their subjects. They pillaged and ruined any place they ruled. Despite how horribly they treated their subjects, no one dared to show any dissent to them. All the elders were spineless hypocrites, one of whom was Lalia's very own father. This aggravated her greatly as she could not understand why, despite suffering a great deal, they were still resigned to their fate. The Cereburus were believed to be the first to settle around those areas. They were a selfish group of people who would rather rob and steal than work a day in their lives. They have a system of the survival of the fittest, which meant that the most powerful is always the leader. Like the parasites they were, they lived off other people's wealth, especially the weak. They were well-known highway robbers who would rob any wayfarer, rich or poor. When they began to grow in notoriety, the people began to avoid their usual hunts. This made living difficult for them, and they were forced to start attacking small villages. Once they attacked and conquered a village, they would stay and rule it, demanding tax from its inhabitants in exchange for their safety. This was a more consistent source of living for them. Slowly but surely, they took over the villages until they had taken over the outlying villages. They chose tax collectors from among the people who would go from compound to compound extorting from their very own people. Most of these tax collectors were respected elders in the village. Anyone who refuses to comply is brutally and publicly killed as a warning, an act which was often carried out by a member of the Cereburu clan or even an elder of the community itself. As if that is not enough, some would torment the natives even further after having collected their share. They would insist that the people share everything they have with them, their food, wealth, homes, and even women. This was done mostly for their amusement. The only place that remained safe from their evil clutches were the kingdoms. The kingdoms were always fully guarded by soldiers, who were skilled warriors and no match for the brutish Cereburus. They threw me in the forbidden forest where they all believed I belong, but I did not make it easy for them. Every time they left me in the forest to go back, they would get back to the village only to find me soundly sleeping on my mother's bed. I kept this on until they got frustrated with me. My father attempted to kill me. I was just a few months old when he lit his own hut on fire while I slept. taking my mother, his other wives and kids out of the compound. He then set our hut into flames. I woke up and crawled myself out. Upon seeing me, he got exasperated and reached out for his dagger to stab me, but my mother would not let him. Even though she did not feel an iota of maternal love towards me and feared me, she could not let my father stab me, especially not in her presence. As she jumped in front of my father to stop him, my father's dagger plunged into her heart and she died on the spot. As soon as he realized what he had done, he dropped the dagger and screamed out in anguish. He fell to her feet and held my mom in his arms, painfully sobbing relentlessly. His other wives ran to him, but he shouted at them to leave him alone. He ordered them all out of the compound and ordered them to take me with them. They ushered me out of my own parents' compound like they would an animal. I was left by the wayside to fend for myself. Even though I was also affected by everything that had just happened, no one was willing to comfort me. Every one of them blamed me for my parents' predicament. I grew up an outcast, but I still lived in the village. I stayed back because I could still live as a normal human being and prove them all wrong. I naively believed that one day they were going to accept me. Staying back also gave me the opportunity to be close to my family, especially my siblings. But they all shunned me. I would sleep on the streets and people called me all sorts of names and threw missiles at me any chance they got. They would spit, throw urine at me and even fecal matter. Despite all of this, I was still determined to stay. As the years went by, the treatment got even worse. I did my best to reach out to my family by doing most of their chores. I would chop wood, fetch water and sneak into the compound in the early hours of the morning to place them. When they got up and found them there, they would happily use them, and that was enough to make me happy and content. My brothers had seen me do this several times, but they would pretend not to see me because it saved them from having to do them. I wanted to prove to them that I was no curse to the family and that I can also be good and human if they would only let me. But for a long time, doing these chores for my family helped me in ways I cannot describe it. I felt loved and wanted. I felt like I belonged once again until one fateful morning. As I finished filling the last jar in the compound with the water and was about to leave, I heard the faint sounds of a commotion. It sounded like the muffled sound of an argument. I snuck out to see what was going on, but as I got closer to the noise, I bumped into a man rushing to leave the compound as well. When I got closer to the commotion, I could see my stepmother screaming out hysterically with arms flailing all over the place. I rushed closer and saw that she was crying over my father's body. He lay sprawled on the ground with a dagger digging into his abdomen. He lay in a pool of what looked to be his own blood. I was so shocked by the sight that I was transfixed in the same spot. I forgot that I was not supposed to be seen in the compound. I could not move my feet to save myself. I held my head tightly, not wanting to cry, but I could not stop myself. And even though he had never loved me, my heart still felt heavy, and there were tears rolling down my cheeks. I was just about to go away when my stepmother rushed towards me, rubbing my father's blood all over me, all the while screaming, "The witch has done it again!" At first, I did not understand what she was doing. I was still in shock. I watched her scream, trying to wrap my head around what was going on. She continued shouting her accusations at me, and it wasn't long before the whole village was gathered around our compound, granting her the audience she sought. She claimed that I had come into the compound and attacked my father, killing him. It did not take much for them to believe the lie she was so maliciously spewing at me. And the worst part was the truth that they did not even give me the chance to clear my name. They started driving me away by hitting me with sticks as hard as they could. I cried out, screaming out my innocence, but they did not care. They only questioned why I was in the compound when I was prohibited, and they refused to believe me when I disclosed my reason as to why I went there. My own siblings and everyone that ever saw me doing the house chores denied ever seeing me there siding with my stepmother. And in the end, without a fair trial, they forced me to leave, or they would resolve to stone me to death. As far as they were concerned, I was evil and I did it and I must pay. As she continued narrating her story, Lalia was overcome by so much sorrow and anguish at the memory of all she had gone through. She could not stop herself from sobbing endlessly. It was as if she was reliving the moments all over again. Kubra sat closer to her, rubbing her shoulder. Seeing how tender Kubra was towards her comforted her, and so she carried on with her story.